Hey, good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Now TV. Thank you so much for joining me for this morning's morning musings. I do appreciate it so very, very much. And I hope you're well. I hope that you are getting through the corona. You know, here in southern Oklahoma, where I live, as I've shared with you before, we have seen, comparatively speaking, extremely few cases of infection and very, very few deaths as a result of the COVID 19. And so we're extremely thankful for that. Uh, our town, in many, many, many ways, is completely open again. You can go to the restaurants, you can go to the stores. Now, there are still some restaurants that do not have the come in and dine open, but by and large, our city really is quite open at this particular time. It is refreshing to see that even in some of the really, really major hot spots around America and even in the world, we are beginning to see a leveling off of the infection rate. It really kind of makes me wonder if the situation is not only as a result of the fact that people are exercising social distancing, they're wearing the masks, and what have you. But in addition, it makes me wonder if perhaps, just perhaps, this concept of community immunity, the fact that the human body is absolutely amazing. You know, David said centuries and centuries ago, millennia ago, that I am fearfully and wonderfully made. And what that means for us in our modern setting is that guess what? The human body has a way of developing immunities to new infections. Now, it takes time, and unfortunately, there's a great deal of initial suffering and even deaths. But the point is still valid that guess what? The human body will adapt. It's absolutely amazing to witness what has happened down through history and how the human body has adapted to the arrival and to the arising of horrific pandemics that have killed millions upon millions of people and then all of a sudden disappeared, literally disappeared. And I suspect that's what's going to happen to the COVID infection because the community immunity, the power of the human body, and yes, I'm not suggesting that, I'm not at all suggesting, please understand, I'm not at all suggesting that we as human beings don't take precautions. I'm not suggesting that we don't wear our masks. I'm not suggesting that we just, flippantly engage in close proximity with large groups of people. No, wisdom is the better part of valor here. Discretion is the better part of wisdom. I'm just simply suggesting that I think that time is going to take care of it. Now, before we get into our video this morning, and it's going to be a little bit of recapitulation, okay? I'll tell you right now because I want to bring us back up to speed to where we've been and where we are in our study on the challenge of Christ as it relates to 2 Peter chapter 3. But in the meantime, I want to make really, really exciting announcements. Exciting from my perspective. I hope from your perspective as well. I want to introduce two brand spanking new books that I have just completed and just introduced. The first is Watching for the Parousia, Were Jesus' Apostles Confused? Now, you need to know something. In Matthew chapter 24 and verse 2, when Jesus predicted the fall of Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple, the apostles immediately responded by asking, "Tell us, when shall these things be? What shall be the sign of your coming and the end of the age?" We are told by 99% of the commentators, well, you see, when Jesus predicted the fall of Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple, the apostles were confused. They didn't have any idea that the temple was actually supposed to be destroyed. Oh, wait, the only way they could conceive of such an event is that it had to occur at the end of time the end of the Christian age, the end of the New Covenant age. That presupposition underlies 99% of all interpretations of Jesus' eschatological teaching. The apostles were, number one, they were just ignorant. To put this in modern terminology among some of my younger friends, it's claimed basically that the apostles were dumb as a box of rocks. Well, the bottom line is we're being told the apostles had no idea of any connection between the coming of the Lord, the judgment, and the resurrection, and the fall of Jerusalem. Or they were simply confused. As suggested, they could not conceive of the destruction of that temple unless it occurred at the end of time. John Calvin took that view. Well, I want to tell you something. In this unprecedented book, and you will not find another book like this anywhere, I present a wealth of information. I had one reviewer contact me just this week as I film and tell me, after reading the book, he said, I do not see how anyone with any logical power at all could ever now claim that the apostles of Jesus were confused in Matthew chapter 24 and verse 3. This book may literally turn your views of Jesus' eschatology on its head. All right? It will challenge you. Because listen, if Jesus' apostles were not confused, to conflate, to link the fall of Jerusalem with his coming and the end of the age, then all futurist eschatology is wrong. It's that simple. It's that profound. And so, like I said, I'm not aware of another book out there. I show from the Old Testament, I show from Jesus' own teaching prior to Matthew chapter 24, that he proved, he gave the link between the coming judgment on Jerusalem and his coming. I show even from, guess what? Even from Josephus, first century Jew, certainly not a Christian, but he understood that the Old Testament prophets foretold AD 70. I show from the patristic writers, who are obviously writing hundreds of years after the fact, and yet they nonetheless go to the Old Testament to show why Jerusalem was destroyed in AD 70. And I give rabbinic testimony showing that even first century, pre-AD 70, rabbis appealed to the Old Testament to predict the coming AD 70 judgment. Look, folks, this book is chock full of evidence. Now, I've got to hurry. I'm taking up too much time here. But the second book that I want to share with you, I am equally excited about it. It is entitled Paul on Trial. Paul, the Pharisees, and the Resurrection. Okay, let me read to you from the back of the book, all right? The Pharisees believed in physical resurrection. Paul, on trial before the Sanhedrin, said he was a Pharisee and that he was on trial for his views of the resurrection. Case closed. Paul must have believed in a physical resurrection. Boy, that sounds logical. I accepted that view for years and years and years. Pardon me. Then I actually began to study on my own. And in this book, I asked the following question. There's no doubt that Paul said that he was a Pharisee. No doubt, no controversy, no debate, all right? But secondly, 14 days later, after saying, Paul, you're a mighty fine fellow because you believe in the resurrection, the Pharisees wanted to kill Paul for his doctrine of the resurrection. Oh, no, wait a minute. If the Pharisees believed in resurrection, and Paul believed in resurrection, and if the Pharisees initially said, my, what a fine fellow Paul is, why is it that 14 days later, they turn on him like a pack of vicious wolves, and they want him dead for his views of the resurrection? I want to suggest to you that this book, I will read the last statement on the back of the book. This unprecedented and fascinating examination of the trial of Paul may well change your mind about the nature of the kingdom of God and the resurrection. Folks, do you realize that Paul taught emphatically, explicitly, and clearly that the resurrection had already begun in the first century? So ask yourself the question. If the resurrection is the raising of physical bodies, decomposed bodies out of the dirt, how could Paul say the resurrection had already begun and was ongoing when he wrote, for instance, in 1 Corinthians 15, where no less than 11 times Paul used the present active indicatives and the present passive indicatives to speak of the resurrection. Folks, if we believe that the resurrection is the raising of human bodies, decomposed human bodies out of the grave, then how could Paul say it was already taking place 2,000 years ago? See, that doesn't even make good nonsense. Okay, both of these books are now available on my website, donkpreston.com, BibleProphecy.com. Go there, and if you order either book or both books, okay? If you order them, send me a note that you saw the offer on Now TV, and I will refund your shipping. Now, if you order both books together, all right, that's going to save you $10 on your order. So please go there, donkpreston.com, BibleProphecy.com, order these two books. And like I said, folks, you're not going to find anything else. Just like the book on where Jesus' apostles confused, there's nothing else like it out there. There's not another book like this anywhere. I looked and I looked and I looked to find another book even closely resembling my development of Paul's trial in this book. I found two books that talked about Paul on trial. One of them sought to prove, well, the Pharisees believed in physical resurrection. Paul believed in the resurrection. Therefore, Paul believed in physical resurrection. Or, that's one book. The other book said, Paul being on trial, his trial proves that Paul was a liar. You see, neither one of those books comes even close. They're not even in the same, not only are they not in the same ballpark, they're not in the same country. You got to have a copy of this book. Okay. Well, like I said, I've gone on a good long while. I wanted to let you know about these books. These are important. These are unprecedented. They are unparalleled books. They will help you understand eschatology in a way that you may never have thought about it before. And the evidence, in my estimation, is clear, it is abundant, and it is powerful. So like I said, I hope you'll avail yourself of these books. Now then, as I said, I knew that I was going to be spending some time on introducing these books this morning, and so I was not going to have time to have a full brand new video developing some new points on the challenge of Christ. Now, let's refresh our memory, all right? Since last year, I have been sharing with you the challenge of Christ. What is the challenge of Christ? Jesus, here it is. Jesus said, John chapter 10, 37 and following, if I do not do the words or the works which my Father has given me, do not believe me. Do not believe me for my word's sake. Believe me for my works. Listen, folks, I cannot overemphasize how incredibly important this challenge of Christ truly is. Jesus himself tells us that if he did not do what he said he was going to do, then we are not supposed to believe him. You do understand, do you not? There have been all sorts of false prophets through the ages. Listen, just this week, I encountered a man on YouTube who told me the rapture will occur within 7 years. Without a doubt, if the Bible is inspired, the rapture will occur in 7 years. And he said, I am a prophet of God. God told me this. It cannot be wrong. Well, I wrote back and I told him, sir, with all due respect, you are not a prophet of God. God did not reveal any such thing to you. And I said, I'm going to archive, I'm going to tag, I'm going to, whatever it is they call it now, I'm going to put this video and your claims right up here at the very top. And I'm going to ask that other people, hey, in 7 years, I may not be around. I'm 70, almost 71 years old. So, there's a pretty good chance that I will no longer be in this world in 7 years. But I do hope and I do pray that those who read that exchange will realize that in 7 years, when the rapture has not occurred, that they will actually confront that man. I posted to him and I said, here's my challenge to you. In 7 years, when the rapture has not occurred, are you willing to repent of making a false prophecy? He simply wrote back and he said, God showed me this prophecy. It cannot fail. Well, here's the interesting thing about it. On his own YouTube channel, he has a video claiming, catch the power of this, folks, claiming that God gave him a vision that the rapture was going to be in 2020. Uh-oh. So now God supposedly spoke to him and said the rapture would be in 2020. Here we are in August and it hasn't happened. So all of a sudden he's recalculated and told him, or God has supposedly told him, the rapture is pardon me. I'm not going to stop the video. That supposedly God has now told him that his first revelation, that the rapture was going to be in 2020. No, scratch that off. Nope, don't pay any attention to that. The rapture is going to be in 7 years, 2027. Folks, you see the challenge of Christ? We have one false prophet after another. Oh, by the way, another prophet, so-called prophet, or prophetess, I should say, by the name of J Days, that's her YouTube video handle, she told me last year that God had talked to her, God had revealed to her that the rapture, the end of the world, will occur in 2021. I challenged her. I actually said, I have $1,000. I have $1,000. And if you've got $1,000, we will put that money in an independent location, and in 2022, at the stroke of midnight, 2021, when the rapture and the end of the world has not happened, whoever is right gets the total money. Well, she refused to do that, but she said, you're the false prophet. You are the one teaching people false doctrine. The rapture, again, if the Bible is inspired at all, the rapture will be in 2021. Well, here we are, August 2020, and yes, it's a year and a month away until September of 2021 when she said that the rapture would occur. Let me ask you a question. How many of these false prophecies do we as Christians have to endure before people learn their lesson? Charles Taze Russell, millions now living will never die. He wrote that in 1950. Well, he wrote it again in 1917, 1918, 1925. Well, here we are. 90 years. And the Lord still hasn't come. Miller, 1844, without a doubt, was going to be the end of the world. Well, nothing happened. So he goes back and recalculates. 1945 is the end of the world. If the Bible is inspired, the world will end in 1845. Nothing happened. Mr. Miller dropped off the scene, and then Ellen G. White picked it up. And we have, as a result, the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Oh, who also keeps telling us, now they don't set dates anymore, but they tell us it's right around the corner. And on and on and on. Remember Hal Lindsey? 1988, or the 1980s, Countdown to Armageddon. Edgar Whisenant, 1988, 88 Reasons Why the Rapture Will Be in 1988. And again, on and on and on we go. Every single one of these false prophets and false prophecies bring shame on the name of Christ. And someone says, well, wait a minute, Don. What about the fact that Jesus didn't come in the first century? Well, you see, that's what I've been trying to explain and to share with you. Jesus said, Matthew 16, 27 and 28, the Son of Man will come in the glory of the Father with his angels and shall reward every man according to his works. And verily I say unto you, there are some standing here which shall not taste of death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. Folks, he said he was going to come in the glory of the Father. I hope you'll go back and you'll look at the many, many videos that I shared with you. What did Jesus mean when he said he was going to come in the glory of the Father? It meant that he was not going to come as a 5'5" Jewish man riding on a literal cloud out of heaven. He was going to come the way the Father had come. The Father had never, ever literally, bodily, visibly came out of heaven. Never. And so from there we went to 2 Peter chapter 3, where Peter speaks of, the earth and the elements therein shall be burned up at the day of the Lord. And he said, in the last days, he tells us the Old Testament prophets spoke, and they said that in the last days, before the coming of the day of the Lord, in the last days, scoffers will come, saying, where is the promise of his coming? Okay, I've got to hurry here. I have shared with you, and boy, folks, this is such a really rich and really wonderful study. I've shared with you that Isaiah chapter 28 spoke of scoffers who would come. They're going to come in the last days. They're going to deny that the precious cornerstone of the Messianic kingdom temple had been laid. And guess what else? They were going to deny coming judgment because the prophet said, do not be scoffers. Okay? These are the last days scoffers. Do not be scoffers, for a fire is kindled in my anger, and it shall burn to the lowest depths. You see, here are the scoffers in the days in which the foundation stone of the Messianic kingdom temple would be built. Do I have to remind you that that precious, tried chief cornerstone is Jesus himself? So we're not looking for a literal, visible, physical temple. No, it's a living temple. It's a spiritual temple. Okay? So here, in the days of the laying of the precious cornerstone, the scoffers would come and they would be denying the coming judgment, the judgment that would burn to the lowest depths and burn up heaven and earth. And I've shared with you, this is taken from Deuteronomy 32, 19 through 23, in which God foretold in Israel's last days that a fire would be kindled in his anger and would burn to the lowest depths. It would consume the mountains. Okay, listen folks, that means, all of this means that in 2 Peter chapter 3, Peter was anticipating the day of the Lord foretold by Isaiah 28. He was anticipating and saying that the scoffers foretold by Isaiah 28 would be denying the laying of the precious cornerstone. Well, in 1 Peter chapter 2, guess what? He says those scoffers denying that chief cornerstone were present in his day. But you see, the scoffers would come denying the coming of the judgment foretold by Deuteronomy 32. But Deuteronomy 32 foretold the judgment that would happen in Israel's last days. Therefore, Peter was talking about the scoffers of Israel's last days. And as we will see next week, the book of Jude tells us that the scoffers that the apostles foretold, the scoffers that not only the apostles, but the scoffers foretold by the Old Testament prophets, the scoffers to come in the last days had arrived. I'll see you next week.